The chilly October morning of 2017 began with an unusual disturbance on Banyan Ridge Court in Boca Raton, Florida. 6 unmarked federal police vehicles quietly pulled up in front of the modest 2-story home of Jerry Stewart, a businessman once regarded as a model citizen in the Long Island community. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as tactical-clad agents established a tight perimeter around the area. Inside, 50-year-old Stewart was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for nearly 2 decades since expanding his business and relocating to South Florida. A rapid knock sounded at 6:12 a.m. Jerry Stewart, FBI. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the reopened investigation into the 2005 disappearance of Richard and Elaine Delaney." The agents later described how Stewart's hand trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup, yet his face remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for more than 10 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In 2005, Long Island was entering a period of rapid suburban expansion around New York. After more than 3 years of economic recovery, new residential neighborhoods were springing up along the bays, interspersed among centuries-old towns. Tree-lined streets, white picket fences, and small shopping districts formed the classic image of a thriving middle class. Belterre was one such community, quiet, orderly, where most residents knew one another and kept to regular daily routines. Among them was the Delaney family. Richard Delaney, 49, owner of a growing kitchen equipment supply company. His wife Elaine, 47, who managed the accounting department at the same company, and their son Evan, 17, a senior at Belterre High School. They were seen as a typical neighborhood family, successful, friendly, with no troubles or disputes. Their 2-story beige house sat at the end of Ashford Drive, with large maple trees in the front yard and a view of the bay. On the morning of September 6th, after the Labor Day holiday weekend, the neighborhood returned to its usual rhythm. The weather was clear, with light sunshine. A few neighbors remembered seeing Elaine watering flowers on the front porch, still wearing her familiar gray sweater. Richard backed his car out of the garage, paused for a few minutes, then went back inside, carrying his briefcase and car keys. He exchanged a few polite words, went into the house, and after that, no one saw them again. By late morning, the Delaney house remained closed up, curtains half drawn, Richard's car still parked in the driveway, with no one coming or going. Evan woke up late after his parents had left the room. When he came downstairs, he noticed the house was unusually silent. The TV in the living room was still on, no one was in the kitchen, and the front door was slightly ajar. He called out for his parents, walked through the downstairs and then upstairs to their bedroom, but got no response. The landline in the kitchen rang a few times and then stopped. Both parents' cell phones went straight to voicemail. Evan ran to a neighbor's house to ask, but no one knew where they had gone. He returned home, stood on the porch, looked down the empty street, and realized something was wrong. Near noon, Evan decided to call the Suffolk County Police emergency line, reporting that his parents had vanished from the house without leaving any trace or message. The dispatcher on duty logged the information, instructed him to stay inside the house, not to touch anything, and said a rapid response unit was being dispatched to the scene. About 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars turned onto the end of Ashford Drive and stopped in front of the familiar white fenced house. Evan came out to open the gate, his voice breaking as he repeated his report. 3 officers got out, introduced themselves, and asked permission to enter and check the house. The front door was ajar, the hinges undamaged, the deadbolt intact. In the living room, the lights were still on, curtains half drawn, the floor clean, no signs of a struggle. The dining room was tidy, with that morning's newspaper still folded on the table, unopened. The kitchen was neat, the microwave empty, no smell of smoke, no pots or dishes in use. On the counter were 2 coffee cups. One still had dried coffee stains on the rim. Upstairs, the bed in the master bedroom was made, and no luggage was missing from the closet. In the garage, Richard Delaney's car was parked in its usual spot, gas tank full, keys in the ignition. There were no signs of a sudden departure. One officer walked around to the backyard, shining a flashlight along the fence, checking the side door and windows. Everything was locked from the inside, no strange footprints on the grass. The surrounding area was quiet, with no abandoned objects. After completing the initial survey, the response team documented the scene. Evan was asked to sit on the porch to provide more information. The last time he saw his parents, their morning routine, recent relationships, and any planned activities for the week. He said the previous night, the family had eaten dinner normally, with no unusual behavior. That morning, he woke up late, found the house empty, and tried calling multiple times, but got no answer. Police took detailed notes and requested a list of relatives and coworkers. One officer radioed the report to headquarters, recommending an official missing persons case be opened for 2 adults disappearing simultaneously. By early afternoon, the forensics team was dispatched. They photographed the entire house and collected fiber and fingerprint samples from key areas. No clear physical evidence was identified. Police temporarily sealed the front door and instructed no one to enter or leave until further notice. The complete scene report was sent to Suffolk County headquarters by late afternoon. The summary stated, "Scene stable, no signs of forced entry or violence, 2 adults missing for unknown reasons, direction of travel undetermined." The file titled, "Missing Persons, Richard and Elaine Delaney," was officially opened, marking the moment the case entered the official law enforcement process. Evan was instructed to stay temporarily with relatives pending initial verification results. Outside the house, the white fence remained untouched, only now a strip of yellow tape stretched across the walkway, closing off the first afternoon in what would become a long, uncertain investigation. The next morning, the Suffolk County Police Department's civilian investigation team was sent to Belterra to begin collecting detailed statements. The house at 48 Ashford Drive remained sealed, yellow tape across the entrance, 2 officers standing guard at the gate. In the garage, Richard Delaney's car sat untouched, marked as potential evidence. On the front porch, Evan sat with a young officer for the first formal interview in the series. He recounted the entire sequence from the previous day, the last evening the whole family was home, the sound of his father on the phone in the office, his mother cleaning the kitchen and going upstairs around 10 o'clock. The next morning, he woke up around 9, found the house empty, with no unusual signs other than absolute silence. Evan spoke evenly, without wavering, repeatedly insisting his parents would never leave without telling him. Police documented everything and asked him to list close contacts, co-workers, and places they frequented. He provided the company name, a few of his mother's friends, and his father's office address. After finishing with Evan, the investigation team split into 2 groups to interview households in the neighborhood. The closest neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Collins, said that around 7 o'clock they saw Elaine watering flowers on the porch, then she went back inside, and they didn't see anyone leave. Mrs. Collins remembered hearing a car engine start briefly, then silence. About half an hour later, when Mr. Collins went to his own car, the Delaney garage door was already closed. Lanes confirmed seeing Richard standing in the yard, holding his briefcase, wearing a blue shirt, looking like he was preparing to leave for work. She said when she returned home around 8, the car was still in the driveway, and she no longer saw him. This matched the statement of the newspaper delivery man, Thomas Riley, who passed the house at 6:45 a.m. He said the front door was slightly open. He saw Elaine in the kitchen through the window. The warm yellow light was on, and nothing seemed unusual. The gardener, Mateo Cruz, said he hadn't come to work that day because of light rain the night before, but 2 days earlier he had received a text from Richard postponing lawn mowing until the following week. Cruz described the Delaney family as tidy, with few visitors. When asked about unusual sounds or activity in the area, no one on the block heard loud noises, arguments, or vehicles speeding away that morning. However, both Mrs. Lanes and Mr. Collins recalled seeing a small silver box truck parked at the Ashford intersection around 7:30 a.m. The truck had no company logo, 2 men were in the cabin, and the license plate was obscured by dust. One of the men was smoking and leaning against the door, looking toward the Delaney house. Then the truck drove off toward Route 25A. Police noted this detail in the report as unidentified vehicle. Another team canvassed nearby homes across the street. 2 witnesses confirmed the truck stopped for only a few minutes and no one got out. All statements were compiled into a preliminary report establishing the last confirmed sighting of the victims between 6:45 and 7:30 a.m. on September 6. After that time, no one saw Richard or Elaine anywhere. Police created a neighborhood map marking witness locations, the truck's direction of travel, and the disappearance timeline. The internal preliminary conclusion: 2 adults vanished under conditions with no evidence of leaving the home, suspicious vehicle observed near the scene, origin unknown. By the end of the day, the interview records were sent to headquarters to be added to the missing persons Delaney file, along with a note requesting a check of registered silver commercial box trucks operating in the area that morning. The following morning, after compiling all statements, the Suffolk County Police Department launched the first large-scale search around the Beltur residential area. More than 20 officers, 4 canine teams, and local volunteer support were mobilized. A temporary command center was set up at the community tennis courts less than a mile from the Delaney home. Maps of the area were spread out on folding tables, with a 5-mile search radius established from the Ashford intersection, divided into 4 main sectors: Route 25A to the north, the wooded area along Port Jefferson Harbor to the east, the older residential Old Field neighborhood to the west, and abandoned industrial land near Highway 347 to the south. Each team was assigned a sector, equipped with radios, GPS units, and lists of locations to check. From early morning, the teams began moving out. The first group swept along Route 25A, checking shoulders, drainage ditches, and bus stops. Posters with photos of Richard and Elaine were distributed to stores, gas stations, and cafes along the route. Another team entered the small wooded area by the harbor, where trails led to an abandoned boat launch. The canine units sniffed around, but found no biological traces or belongings. Civilian patrol volunteers walked empty lots, noting many old truck tire marks, but most predated the disappearance. The Old Field neighborhood was checked last that day. Officers went door to door, asking about the silver truck, but no one got a clear view of the plate or the driver's face. By afternoon, as the search expanded near the bay shoreline, strong winds made observation difficult, forcing teams to stop before sunset. The day's summary report noted, no physical traces, no new witnesses, no cell phone activity or bank card usage by either victim after September 6. On the second morning, the search continued along the waterfront embankments and low woods around a small lake near Roosevelt Road. A dive rescue team checked shallow water areas but found nothing unusual. Some officers coordinated with the Port Jefferson station to review security camera footage from the ferry dock, stores, and main roads. Video analysis showed normal traffic volume, with no vehicle matching the silver truck description between 6 and 8 o'clock. That afternoon, police posted public missing persons notices at Town Hall and released information to local news. Community volunteers helped distribute flyers and put up posters around shopping areas and schools. By the end of the week, more than 40 smaller zones within the 5-mile radius had been searched. The final daily report concluded, no indications of criminal activity in the area, no new evidence collected, 5-mile search radius around Ashford address completed. Police asked residents to remain vigilant and report any leads. That evening, the temporary command center was dismantled. The area maps covered with hundreds of small marks, each square representing a parcel of land checked and found empty. The Delaney house remained preserved in its original state, guarded by rotating officers, porch light on all night. The entire neighborhood gradually fell silent, leaving only the notice posted at the gate in bold letters, missing, information needed. After 4 days of fruitless searching within the residential area, the Suffolk County Police Department decided to expand the search zone beyond Beltur. The focus shifted to industrial areas and transportation routes that could lead off Long Island. The expanded plan was rolled out on the morning of the 5th day, with additional units, including a water rescue team, ground search teams, and 2 drone units for aerial terrain observation. The temporary field command center was relocated to an old warehouse at Port Jefferson Harbor, which had enough space for rescue vehicles, generators, and a coordination room. The industrial zone south of the harbor was chosen as the starting point because of its many abandoned warehouses, container yards, and a short direct connector to Route 347. Each sector was divided into grids, and teams rotated through systematic sweeps. K-9 units were released along the chain-link fences. Reactions were weak, no unusual scents detected. In a vacant lot near Warehouse 18, an officer found a small piece of white cloth snagged on rusted barbed wire, caked with mud and coal dust. The item was bagged, assigned a scene number, and sent to the lab for analysis. There was no immediate indication it was directly related to the disappearance, but it was retained for comparison. Meanwhile, the Marine Patrol expanded its scope to the Port Jefferson Ferry Terminal, checking passenger manifests, cargo logs, and vehicle records for the morning of September 6. No Richard or Elaine Delaney appeared on the lists, nor any license plate matching the silver pickup described by witnesses. Security camera footage from the terminal captured numerous vehicles entering and exiting between 6:30 and 8 a.m., but most images were blurry or partially obstructed. The tech team retained full copies of the recordings for later detailed review. At the same time, a third team canvassed gas stations along Route 25A and Route 347. The morning shift attendant at the Sunoco in Setauket recalled a silver pickup stopping for gas that morning, but could not remember the plate or the driver's face clearly. A statement was taken. The description partially matched the Bolterra witness account. Police pulled electronic payment records, but no transaction matched the Delaney family names or cards. That afternoon, the harbor area was scanned with handheld thermal imagers, checking long sealed containers. No heat signatures or biological signs were detected. Sea wind picked up, temperatures dropped, and teams were ordered to pack up before dark. The day's consolidated report noted, 1 piece of white cloth recovered from the industrial zone, no other physical evidence. The cloth sample was sent for fiber analysis to determine origin. On the 6th day, the search continued expanding southwest, covering Nichols Road and the on-ramp to Route 495, the main artery off Long Island. Toll plazas were contacted for camera footage and EZ Pass data. No images showed Richard's vehicle or anything similar leaving the area on the day of the disappearance. The Information Coordination Team updated local media, announcing the widened search perimeter and appealing for public tips about the silver pickup. By the end of the first week, the area map was densely marked with symbols indicating checked zones, the harbor, warehouses, Route 25A, Route 347, gas stations, and exit routes. Preliminary summary: no evidence the 2 victims left Long Island. No new physical evidence or witnesses beyond the unidentified white cloth scrap. The Saturday report closed with the field commander's only note: no additional viable leads. Maintain current search perimeter. As night fell, patrol vehicles pulled out one by one, leaving the harbor bathed in faint yellow light and the soft slap of waves against the old wooden pier, closing a week of searching with no clear results. After the expanded search operation ended without results, the Suffolk County investigation team shifted focus to reviewing Richard Delaney's financial activity for any irregularities prior to the disappearance. A court order for bank records was issued on the 8th day after the case was opened, allowing the Financial Crimes Unit access to the previous 6 months of accounts. Printed statements were spread across the conference table in the temporary investigation room at Port Jefferson headquarters. Most transactions were routine for Delaney kitchen supplies, inventory purchases, payroll, and restaurant supply contracts. However, among the large transfers, one payment of $482,000 made at the end of August stood out. Recipient Stewart Bakery Supply, account registered at a commercial bank branch in Setauket. The entry was immediately flagged in red ink because no contract on file with Delaney Kitchen Supplies listed any business with that company. Cross-checking tax records revealed Stewart Bakery Supply was registered as a food ingredient supplier with no direct connection to kitchen equipment sales. A business information subpoena confirmed the owner as Jerry Stewart, age 50, resident of Medford, with a prior history of small-scale restaurant and bakery operations. State Business Registry showed Stewart had once been Richard Delaney's partner in a planned food store chain that was abandoned 2 years earlier due to profit disputes. An internal report described the relationship as showing signs of financial tension. Delaney Company accountants, when interviewed, said they had no knowledge of the nearly $500,000 transfer and no supporting documentation. One finance manager recalled Richard mentioning settling an old debt, but provided no details. Police sent a formal request to Stewart's bank for withdrawal records. Data returned showed the full amount was deposited into the company account on August 28, and nearly all of it, $475,000, withdrawn in cash over the next 2 days in 3 separate transactions. Bank surveillance captured Jerry Stewart personally making the withdrawals, wearing a light-colored shirt, baseball cap, and carrying a black leather bag. Enlarged stills matched his driver's license photo perfectly. Teller notes indicated no signs of duress or forgery. Transactions were completed with the account holder's signature. Investigators noted the timing fell in the week immediately before Richard and Elaine Delaney vanished. Delaney Company ledgers recorded the outgoing funds as expansion investment, but listed no detailed recipient or supporting paperwork. Stewart Company books, conversely, showed no corresponding revenue entry. The interim report concluded, large transfer of unknown purpose to Jerry Stewart, owner of Stewart Bakery Supply, who has direct prior financial ties to Richard Delaney. Nature of transaction unverified. By day's end, the information was added to the official missing persons file with a preliminary assessment that the Delaney-Stewart business relationship may play a significant role in determining the cause of the incident. A summary was forwarded to the lead investigative unit titled Financial Review, Delaney-Stewart Transaction, with instructions to locate and interview Jerry Stewart within the next 24 hours to clarify the source of funds and the connection between the two companies. The following morning, after the financial report was finalized, the Suffolk County Police Department served Jerry Stewart with a subpoena to appear at Port Jefferson headquarters regarding the suspicious transfer from Richard Delaney. Stewart arrived at 9:15 a.m., accompanied by private counsel, dressed sharply and appearing confident. The interview took place in a small conference room with 2 lead detectives and a stenographer present. The first questions centered on the nature of his relationship with Delaney. He confirmed they had partnered 2 years earlier on a food store chain that failed due to management differences. He insisted all financial issues had been resolved with no lingering disputes. When asked about the $482,000 transfer from Richard's account, Stewart described it as a late payment for his remaining capital contribution in the old project, not a new transaction. When police requested any contract or receipt, Stewart shook his head, saying documents had been lost during an office move and file reorganization. His attorney intervened, instructing detectives to limit questions to the financial transaction and not delve into personal matters. Asked about recent personal contact with Richard, Stewart said they maintained ordinary business contact, occasional phone calls, no conflicts or threats. He claimed the last time he spoke to Richard was late August, a short call about wrapping up old business. He could not recall the exact date. When asked to produce call logs or messages, Stewart said he used his personal phone and did not save texts. Detectives made detailed notes and requested carrier records. Throughout the morning, Stewart remained calm, answering carefully, occasionally pausing to confer quietly with counsel. He appeared cooperative, but avoided specifics about his company's operations. Asked why he withdrew nearly the entire amount in cash immediately after deposit, he explained it was cash needed for urgent supplier payments and operating expenses, but named no specific vendors. When pressed for internal ledgers or disbursement records, he said the books were being corrected by his accountant due to an error and promised to provide them later. Asked why Stewart Bakery Supply showed normal activity, yet no revenue entry matching the large deposit, he replied it was working capital held in reserve and not yet reflected in monthly reports. His tone stayed even. But one detective noted in the file, answers sound rehearsed, not spontaneous. By early afternoon, the interview concluded without yielding any definitive new information. The summary report read, Jerry Stewart acknowledges prior business relationship with Richard Delaney, denies personal conflict, provides no documentation proving legitimacy of transfer, cites lost records. A search warrant request for Stewart's properties was drafted immediately afterward, but denied by legal for lack of probable cause of criminal conduct or risk of evidence destruction. Detectives were authorized only to monitor the company accounts and Stewart's movements pending further information. The interview transcript was filed under financial review. Interviewed J. Stewart with the assessment. Individual with direct financial link, cooperative on the surface, no clear criminal indicators yet. At day's end, Stewart left the building silently while the team remained to review the transcript, highlighting inconsistencies between his statements and bank records. With no concrete evidence to expand authority, the matter was kept at monitoring level, and the full interview content was forwarded to Suffolk County headquarters for detailed analysis. After the Jerry Stewart interview ended without concrete results, the investigation team decided to return to the original scene for a meticulous second examination of any details possibly overlooked in the initial response. The second site survey was launched on the morning of the 10th day since the disappearance was reported. The Delaney home on Ashford Drive remained sealed. Yellow tape faded from rain. Inside, furnishings were exactly as left after the first search. The Suffolk County forensics team, 5 members, brought fingerprint powder, UV lights, and fiber collection tools. The entire process was video recorded and documented under case officer supervision. The first focus area was the front entrance and hallway, believed to be the only exit used that morning. Powder was applied to doorknobs, frames, light switches, and nearby walls. Results showed most prints belonged to Evan and Elaine, no new unknown prints. On the hallway floor, a faint shoe impression was located near the shoe cabinet. Preliminary analysis identified it as an athletic shoe, average size, most likely Richard Delaney's. The print was lifted with adhesive and sealed in an evidence envelope. In the living room, UV light revealed no bodily fluids or dried blood on surfaces. Furniture, tables, and curtains were clean, dust even, no signs of disturbance. The dining room was next. The morning newspaper remained folded as found. A small gray fiber was recovered from beneath the table leg, possibly shed from one of the victim's clothing. It was collected with sterile forceps into a sealed nylon bag labeled Sample 8B, dining area. In the kitchen, attention returned to the bar counter, where the 2 coffee cups had been found initially. Bottoms and handles yielded 2 additional matching prints, one Elaine, one Richard. No unknowns. Appliances, coffee maker, microwave, refrigerator, were operational with no foreign objects or pry marks. Upstairs, the master bedroom was scanned thoroughly. UV light on the bedding showed no suspicious stains or drag marks. The closet door was ajar, clothes hung neatly. Elaine's jewelry box was intact, except for a missing silver necklace. Evan confirmed she wore daily. Forensics noted, personal item absent, removal timing, undetermined. Bedroom windows were locked from inside. No pry marks or damage. In Richard's office, documents were orderly, desktop computer in sleep mode. No recent access signs. A minor scratch was noted on the desk corner, possibly from metal impact, source undetermined. The garage was last. Concrete floor dry. No drag marks or fluid spills. Even dust layer confirmed no vehicle movement since the initial response. 2 folding chairs leaned against the wall, seats covered in undisturbed fine dust, no fresh handprints. The rear door to the yard was locked from inside, deadbolt intact. All collected items, 3 fibers, 1 shoe print, and scene photos were sealed and transferred to evidence storage. The day's report exceeded 30 pages, concluding, no signs of violence, no unusual physical evidence, no new findings confirming criminal activity inside the Delaney residence. The second scene assessment determined the house remained in the same condition as the first inspection. Collected samples were identification only and not clearly linked to criminal conduct. When the forensics team departed, the house was relocked and freshly sealed. On the front porch, late afternoon sunlight slanted through dust on the yellow warning sign, the only remaining trace of a careful but so far fruitless search. The second on-site investigation report was submitted to the department early the following week and was treated as the provisional conclusion of the field investigation phase. No physical evidence confirmed criminal activity. No signs of struggle or forced entry were discovered. Based on the available data, the investigation team prepared a comprehensive assessment in which the primary hypothesis was voluntary departure from home. The basis for this conclusion stemmed from the fact that both victims were adults capable of independent movement, and the scene showed no indications of coercion. Some members of the team leaned toward the possibility of internal family conflict, suggesting that an argument may have led both individuals to temporarily leave the residence. The minutes of the internal meeting held on September 18 clearly stated, "No evidence of criminal activity, recommend monitoring the behavior of the remaining individuals in the household." The phrase remaining individuals referred solely to Evan, the only person present in the house at the time the incident was reported. Although there was no incriminating evidence, his name was added to the standard behavioral monitoring list. Investigators began indirect surveillance, recording Evan's daily routines, social contacts, and financial activities. Academic and psychological records were obtained from Belterra High School for background evaluation. Both his homeroom teacher and school counselor described him as a quiet student with decent grades, minimal social interaction, and no signs of violence or behavioral disorders. However, one officer noted in the report, unusually calm demeanor when reporting the incident, no visible anxiety or panic. This comment was included in the file as grounds for expanded observation, despite lacking specific legal justification. Police also examined Evan's mobile phone records for the 3 days surrounding the disappearance and found no unusual calls or messages. Computer history was extracted and showed only academic-related browsing and sports websites. Meanwhile, the investigation into Jerry Stewart remained stalled. No documentation supported claims of financial disputes, and there were no indications of his direct involvement in the disappearance. Combining all factors, the Suffolk County Police Department was forced to temporarily classify the case as missing persons, cause undetermined. A media monitoring order was issued to limit the spread of rumors and protect the family's reputation. An internal memo stated, "No confirmed criminal elements, awaiting additional witness data." Concurrently, the forensics unit halted further testing due to the absence of comparison samples. Several younger investigators objected, arguing that the search scope and evidence collection had been insufficient, but the decision to pause remained in effect due to lack of sufficient legal grounds. Evan continued to be discreetly monitored for 2 weeks, during which his behavior was recorded as normal, attending school, returning home, and occasionally meeting friends. There were no signs of asset liquidation or contact with unknown individuals. The surveillance file concluded with the note, "No conflicts observed, no suspicious behavior." Nevertheless, Evan's profile remained flagged in the report as a person of ongoing interest. After 2 weeks of silence, local media began questioning the case's progress. The police department spokesperson responded briefly, "We are pursuing multiple possibilities and have reached no final conclusion." By late September, a Phase 1 summary meeting was held at Suffolk County headquarters. The investigation team's 54-page report affirmed, "No physical evidence or testimony supports a criminal hypothesis. The 2 missing individuals are capable of having left voluntarily." The criminal hypothesis was temporarily set aside, and the file was shifted to passive monitoring status. The Delaney house remained sealed, but no new activity occurred at the scene. Volunteer search groups were stood down, leaving only a "missing information needed" sign in the front yard. The case began sliding into stagnation. In the final document of this phase, a cold note appeared in the conclusion section. No evidence found to support a criminal hypothesis. 6 months after the case was opened, the Delaney family disappearance still showed no significant progress. All initial investigative avenues, from personal relationships and finances to possible travel outside the area, had been exhausted without concrete results. Periodic reports from the investigation team consistently noted no new leads. The forensics lab found no additional DNA traces or unknown fingerprints in the collected samples. Bank records confirmed that Richard and Elaine's accounts had no transactions after September 5. Credit cards were unused, and no cash withdrawals occurred. Both mobile phones remained disconnected and had never been reactivated on any network. Police contacted regional transportation companies, airports, and bus terminals for records of ticket purchases or travel, but no matching passenger names were found. Previously interviewed witnesses provided no new information. The only detail beyond the scene itself remained the reported silver pickup truck, but vehicle registration tracing yielded nothing due to an unconfirmed license plate. In March of the following year, a closing summary meeting was held at the Suffolk County Investigation Office. The report, chaired by Lieutenant Harold McCree, stated clearly, no criminal element has been established. No new evidence collected in the past 6 months. Recommend transferring the case to inactive status. All attending investigators signed an agreement. The process of transferring the file began with unsealing the scene and returning property rights to the legal heir, Evan Delaney. The house on Ashford Drive was cleaned, its contents inventoried, and separately sealed in court storage for possible future investigation. The missing persons Delaney bulletin remained on the internal system, but was moved to periodic review rather than active investigation. The command center noted, case shows no criminal indicators or community threat, investigation suspended. Local press ran short articles quoting the police statement. After thorough review of all evidence and testimony, authorities have found no basis to conclude criminal activity in the Delaney family disappearance. The file will be archived and may be reopened if new information emerges. Thereafter, the case gradually faded from regional news, surviving only in periodic administrative records. The Delaney home was listed for sale, but remained unsold for months before being transferred to Bank Asset Management. Evan left Long Island to attend college out of state and no longer appeared in local directories. In the Suffolk County Police Department's case management system, the Delaney file was assigned archive number 05MP337B with the brief note, case inactive. No new evidence. Lieutenant McCree's final summary ended with the sentence, no new transaction, telephone, or witness data. No indication of third-party involvement. The official case closure was recorded on March 10, marking the moment the 2005 Beltur disappearance was formally placed on inactive status, awaiting indefinite storage among Suffolk County's unsolved cases. After the suspension decision was approved, the entire Delaney family missing persons file was transferred to the Suffolk County Police Cold Case Storage Unit, following standard procedure for inactive investigations. The handover took place in mid-March and included more than 600 pages of minutes, crime scene photos, forensic reports, financial data, and witness statements. All physical evidence collected during the investigation, fabric fibers, shoe prints, dust samples, and personal items, was resealed in evidence bags, labeled, and signed off by the forensics lab. Each envelope was placed in heat-resistant plastic boxes coded to case number 05MP337B and stored on shelf 24, section C, row 3. The transfer log clearly stated, status, inactive, no new leads. Evidence retained for possible re-examination. The Suffolk County Cold Case Storage Facility is located in the basement of the old administrative building, an area inaccessible to the public, where hundreds of unresolved cases are preserved under controlled temperature conditions. Each box is numbered, dated, and labeled with the responsible officer and case type. At that time, The Delaney case was just one code among many disappearances, homicides, and unidentified perpetrator crimes dating from the 1970s through the early 2000s. Periodic reviews occurred only twice a year, mainly to check the condition of evidence and update records if new data arrived from other agencies. For the 10 years following closure, no additional reports were added to the Delaney file. The electronic management system retained the inactive status with no updates from any New York State Police unit. The physical evidence had never undergone DNA testing because at the time, costs were high and the technology was not widely deployed for missing persons cases without signs of foul play. Routine inspections only confirmed that evidence bags remained sealed, signatures were intact, and no physical damage had occurred. Annual cold case administrative reports listed the Delaney file under pending review. No action taken. The dates on the folder covers changed regularly with each report, but no one reopened the contents. By the late 2010s, Box 337B had acquired a light coating of dust and sat among dozens of contemporaneous cases, becoming part of the silent archive beneath Suffolk County Police Headquarters. In early 2017, the Suffolk County Police Department launched a cold case unit reorganization program to re-examine long-dormant cases. The New York State Law Enforcement Agency issued a directive to establish a dedicated team of experienced investigators and forensic specialists, leveraging advances in DNA testing and digital data storage to re-evaluate missing persons cases of undetermined cause. Retired Lieutenant J. Salter, who had served 25 years in criminal investigations, was brought back as a consultant and appointed to lead the pilot team. He was tasked with reviewing nearly 300 archived cases, prioritizing those with biological evidence or untested samples suitable for modern technology. Among them, Case 05MP337B, labeled Delaney, Missing Persons Belterre, caught Salter's attention due to multiple underexploited details. 2 adults vanishing simultaneously, a stable scene with no violence, yet preserved fibers, shoe prints, and other sealed evidence. He requested a digital copy of the original file and had the entire evidence box retrieved from storage. The plastic box, untouched for 12 years and sealed with 3 layers of now yellowed tape, was brought to his office. Salter verified the case number, signatures, and condition of the evidence bags, then signed the reactivation form. The log noted, reason for reactivation, presence of untested biological evidence. At the same time, the new cold case unit was officially announced, consisting of 5 investigators, 1 forensic specialist, and 1 data analyst. Their goal was to test the effectiveness of modern DNA technology on old cases. Salter selected the Delaney file as the pilot for the new round of investigations because of its clear parameters, complete storage history, and lack of prior modern forensic processing. In the team's first meeting, he summarized the case: 2 people missing since September 2005, no signs of departure, clean scene, file closed after 6 months. He pointed to the final note on the cover, no new evidence, and said simply, if there's no evidence, we'll make some from what was overlooked. Tasks were immediately assigned. The technical team would re-examine evidence bags and assess DNA testing feasibility. The administrative team would review victim backgrounds, relationships, and update old financial records. The forensic team would schedule new lab tests with the State Central Laboratory. In the electronic system, the Delaney file status changed from inactive to reactivated, marking the official reopening after 12 years. That same day, Salter signed the evidence transfer form, prioritizing fabric fibers, shoe prints, and personal items for testing. He also requested backups of all 2005 reports, including interview transcripts, banking data, and the financial assessment related to Jerry Stewart. The internal justification read, financial factors may indicate hidden motive. The reactivation of the Delaney file was announced in the Suffolk County Police Internal Bulletin as part of the cold case re-examination project. All actions were logged in the new electronic tracking system. By the end of March, Box 337B was officially moved to the crime scene analysis room under Salter's signature as the responsible officer. For the first time in over a decade, the names Richard and Elaine Delaney reappeared on the active case list with the small system note, "Reopened for forensic review," assigned to Detective J. Salter. The room fell silent as Salter closed the box lid, looked at the faded writing on the old sealing tape, and added his final signature to the form, officially marking the 2005 Beltura disappearance as reopened under Suffolk County's 2017 cold case program. Immediately after the Delaney file was reactivated, the Suffolk County Police Department's forensic team proceeded to unseal the evidence box to examine and recatalog every item according to 2017 standards. The inspection took place in the state's central laboratory under the supervision of a cold case unit representative and a DNA analysis specialist. Plastic evidence box 337B was removed from secure storage, sealed with 3 layers of old tape bearing the 2005 technical unit's confirmation signatures. The entire unsealing process was fully video recorded. Each evidence bag was removed and placed on a stainless steel table. There were 8 bags in total, 3 containing fabric fibers, 1 with a footwear impression, 2 with adhered dust, 1 with personal items, and 1 separate bag holding a piece of white cloth recovered from the industrial area near Port Jefferson during the expanded search that year. This particular cloth sample was the reason Salter selected the Delaney case as the first test for the new DNA analysis technology. All bags were intact, seals untorn, markings matching the original file. The forensic technician carefully opened bag 05E white cloth with a sterile scalpel and removed a piece of fabric, approximately 10 cores 8 centimeters. One edge torn, the middle stained grayish-brown. The sample was divided into 3 parts. One retained untouched as a control, the other 2 designated for chemical and biological analysis. Under spectroscopic microscopy, the fibers were identified as a polyester cotton blend, a type commonly used in women's clothing. Under UV light, the technician detected a faint discoloration area that could indicate biological fluid residue. A luminol test returned a weak positive reaction, sufficient to qualify the sample for nuclear DNA testing. The sample was transferred to the new generation STR mixed DNA extraction system, a technology capable of amplifying and sequencing genetic material, even from extremely small amounts. The 7-hour process displayed results on screen as an identification number string. The system automatically compared it against the National CODIS DNA database, which already contained Elaine Delaney's reference profile, derived from 2004 dental and hospital records. By late afternoon, the automated report returned a 99.97% match with Elaine Delaney's DNA. The report was printed, signed by the chief forensic examiner, and immediately forwarded to Detective J. Salter and the cold case unit. In the report, the technician noted, female DNA matching Elaine Delaney detected on cloth recovered from the Port Jefferson industrial area. No male DNA or foreign material present. This discovery was regarded as the case's first breakthrough after more than 12 years. That same evening, Salter convened an emergency meeting at the cold case office, presented the forensic results, and requested reclassification of the case from missing persons to suspicious homicide, pursuant to biological evidence guidelines. The meeting minutes were approved, signed by department heads at 9:47 p.m. on April 3, 2017. The department's database automatically updated case number 05MP337B, was changed to 05H337B. Classification homicide, suspicious circumstances. The remaining evidence items were resealed under controlled temperature conditions. The white cloth fragment alone was moved to priority storage for possible future analysis. A 12-page report sent to the Suffolk County Police Commissioner clearly stated the conclusion: victim Elaine Delaney's DNA discovered at a location outside the Beltur residential area. Match probability exceeds legal threshold. Case exhibits indicators of potential criminal activity, recommendation to open criminal homicide investigation. After signing, Salter filed a copy in the cold case archive and marked the status column active review. That day, on the Suffolk County Police Department's electronic roster, the 2005 Beltura disappearance was no longer listed under missing persons, but officially reclassified as an unsolved suspected homicide, opening an entirely new phase in the more than decade-long investigation. Once the DNA result was confirmed and the case officially reclassified, Detective J. Salter immediately directed the digital unit to re-examine all communication records preserved from the 2005 file for additional timeline markers and associated parties. In the Suffolk County Police Department's electronic archive, landline data from the Delaney residence was still backed up on old magnetic tapes stored in the department's telecommunications vault. Recovery was assigned to the New York State Telecommunications Technical Division. 2 tape reels were transported to the Technical Investigation Lab and loaded into legacy data reading equipment for extraction. After 2 days, the complete call log for September 1, 6, 2005 was restored as a digital spreadsheet. Most incoming and outgoing calls were routine work-related, but one entry stood out just before the disappearance window: an outgoing call at 7:18 a.m. on September 6 from the Delaney home landline to the Stewart Bakery Supply Office in Medford. Call duration was 2 minutes 37 seconds, ending at 7:21 a.m. This was the last recorded call from the family's landline before the line went inactive. The data was cross-checked against the service provider's switch logs, confirming the destination number belonged to the Stewart office and that the office voicemail system activated automatically at 7:19 a.m. that morning. The technical report noted no further incoming or outgoing calls after 7:21 a.m. that day. Based on this finding, Salter ordered parallel analysis of Stewart Bakery Supply's communication history, including both landline and mobile phones registered to Jerry Stewart. Cross-referencing revealed that Stewart's office phone received an unidentified incoming call lasting 3 minutes, starting at 7:19 a.m. and ending at 7:22 a.m., exactly matching the duration from the Delaney side. The report was independently verified and signed by 2 technicians, ruling out data error or time zone discrepancy. This precise overlap became the first evidence proving direct contact between the Delaney household and Jerry Stewart's company on the morning of the disappearance. The finding was immediately added to the investigative file. The technical team continued recovering the household modem's internet logs, determining the connection terminated completely after 7:25 a.m., only minutes after the call. System logs led technicians to conclude that both phone and internet lines were disconnected from inside the residence, not due to external failure. Salter requested backup copies of any remaining voicemail recordings from the provider's archive, but due to 2005 equipment limitations, only connection metadata could be recovered, not audio content. Despite the absence of recordings, the timing and destination of the call retained full evidentiary value and were included in the official report. In the summary, the technician wrote, "Final call from the Delaney residence to Stewart Bakery Supply, Medford, placed on the morning of September 6, 2005, duration 2:37, ending prior to system disconnection. No further communication activity." Salter presented this information to unit leadership, along with a request to expand verification regarding Stewart. Records updated the case timeline with the entry, 7:18 a.m., last outgoing call to Stewart Bakery Supply. The case progression map was revised, adding a phone icon at the Delaney residence with a line extending to Medford. By day's end, the cold case team finalized an 11-page report stating, "Recovered telephone data confirms direct contact between the Delaney residence and Stewart Bakery Supply on the morning of the disappearance, timing consistent with the last confirmed sighting of the victim. No subsequent communication activity." This discovery propelled the investigation into a new phase, as the sole remaining link between the parties had been technically re-established after more than 12 years of obscurity in the files. The telephone data match caused the cold case team to focus all attention on the Medford area, where Stewart Bakery Supply's headquarters and warehouse were located. Detective J. Salter immediately filed for a search warrant with the Suffolk County Court, citing legal grounds of direct morning of disappearance contact between the Delaney residence and Stewart's office phone, combined with confirmed DNA from victim Elaine Delaney on an item recovered from the Port Jefferson Industrial Zone, only miles from Stewart's warehouse. The warrant was approved within 48 hours, authorizing a full survey of the production facility and storage areas at 1925 Hawkins Avenue, Medford. On the morning of April 12, 2017, a team of 6 officers, 2 forensic specialists, and 1 ground-penetrating radar technician arrived on site. The warehouse's large metal door was rusted. The old sign barely readable as Stewart Bakery Supply Inc. Stewart was summoned to observe the search, accompanied by his attorney. He remained calm, repeatedly stating the facility had been shuttered since 2008 and now only stored old equipment. Salter presented the warrant and instructed him to remain outside the search perimeter. The forensic team began measuring the building, dividing it into 5 search zones. The western area, housing old industrial ovens, was selected for initial scanning. Ground-penetrating radar began sweeping from the main entrance inward, emitting high-frequency pulses to map subsurface structures. After a few minutes, the screen showed uniform returns, indicating stable soil beneath the concrete. But as the unit moved toward the center of the warehouse, approximately 11 meters from the north wall, the technician detected an anomalous signal. A hollow reflective void roughly 2 square meters in area and about half a meter below the surface. He stopped the machine and marked the zone with red spray paint. The sensor was run twice more. Results were identical. The structure below was highly likely an artificial cavity. Salter ordered all other activity halted and safety barriers erected. While awaiting the drilling team, forensic personnel collected floor dust samples and photographed each step. Near the adjacent wall, they discovered an old wooden cabinet containing broken electrical parts and torn paperwork. A small tin box at the bottom stood out due to its different color. When opened, it contained a dust-covered metal wristwatch with a scratched crystal and worn steel band. The technician gently cleaned the case back, revealing faint engraved lettering still legible, RD. The item was immediately photographed, labeled Evidence 15A, and sealed in an evidence bag. Salter recognized it and confirmed that, according to 2005 property records, Richard Delaney owned a similarly engraved Rolex purchased at a Manhattan jewelry store in 2003. When questioned about its origin, Stewart appeared flustered and claimed it might belong to a former customer left behind when the warehouse was still active. His response was fully recorded. Meanwhile, the drilling team arrived and began cutting through the marked concrete slab. After about 40 minutes, the bit broke through the cement, exposing a small void beneath. A handheld camera was lowered for video. The cavity contained wood fragments, a broken metal pipe section, and damp gray soil. No large objects or obvious biological signs were visible, but the abnormal depth indicated prior tampering. Excavated soil was bagged and sent to the lab for organic analysis. After completion, the area was temporarily resealed to preserve the scene. The field report was finalized that afternoon, documenting all findings. Artificial void discovered beneath floor of Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse, Medford Industrial Zone coordinates. Recovered evidence: metal wristwatch engraved RD, male Rolex type, probable match to Richard Delaney property. Surrounding floor shows uneven repair signs. Copies with photographs were sent to Suffolk County Command. As the forensic team packed up, Salter stood at the warehouse door, looking at the freshly cut concrete, and wrote in his notebook, "The ground doesn't lie. Everything buried leaves a hollow." By day's end, all evidence was sealed and transferred to the department's central analysis facility, officially closing the first search day at the Medford site with the most significant discovery since the case was reopened. Immediately after the Medford warehouse search concluded, all evidence collected that day, especially the Rolex watch engraved RD, was transported directly to the Suffolk County Police Department's Central Forensic Laboratory for detailed examination. Analysis began the next morning under highest priority protocol as directed by Detective J. Salter. The items were received fully sealed with triple signature confirmation from the Field Forensic Team, Cold Case Unit, and Examination Office. The process started with multi-angle photography documenting physical condition, scratched crystal, worn steel bezel, one broken link in the band, surface coated in dust and grime. Under electron microscopy, the technician observed numerous dust particles mixed with dark brown organic residue in the band links. These particles were sampled separately and placed in test tubes for DNA testing. Prior to biological analysis, the watch underwent chemical treatment to identify adherent substances. Luminol returned a weak positive for hemoglobin, indicating possible human blood traces despite heavy oxidation from prolonged air exposure. The band and clasp were soaked in neutralizing solution, then rinsed with ethanol solvent to release DNA. The extract was processed through new generation STR kit PCR amplification. Electropherogram results displayed gene segments of sufficient length for comparison. The profile was entered into the state CODIS database. After 6 hours, the system returned an automated 99.994% match with Richard Delaney's reference DNA, derived from 2004 dental records and North Shore Hospital medical files. The report was printed the same day, signed by the chief forensic examiner, and delivered directly to Salter. Additional spectroscopic microscopy confirmed human skin cell traces within the dust residue, consistent with the same DNA source. The examiner concluded the DNA on the watch could not result from casual contact by another person due to the high match probability and concentrated distribution on the case back, where only regular wear would deposit sufficient epithelial cells through friction. The report also confirmed no DNA from any other individual, including Jerry Stewart, was present on the item. Nevertheless, the watch's recovery from premises owned by Stewart established the first direct physical link between the location and a victim. In the preliminary evaluation memo, Salter wrote, Evidence 15A, Rolex watch. Confirms Richard Delaney DNA recovered from area controlled by Jerry Stewart. Probability of cross-contamination or error effectively 0. The information was entered into the electronic case file under Forensic Link, Physical Evidence. Simultaneously, soil samples from the subsurface void were sent for organic analysis. Initial reports showed decomposed hemoglobin traces, though not yet conclusive for identification. Regardless, the Richard Delaney DNA on the watch alone carried sufficient weight to expand the investigation. During the afternoon internal briefing, Salter presented all test results, emphasizing this was the first physical evidence in 12 years proving a victim had been present at Stewart's warehouse. Unit heads agreed to update the case file with the note, Physical connection established between victim and property of suspect. A 15-page summary report was forwarded to Department Command and the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office the same day. All DNA samples, photographs, and testing procedures were backed up and archived in the Central Forensic Database. At day's end, Salter signed the cold case file supplement, marking the status column Evidence Confirmed, Victim DNA Match. The final note in that day's minutes consisted of only 6 words, yet carried immense weight for the entire investigation. First physical evidence now established. After the DNA report confirmed the watch recovered in the Medford warehouse belonged to Richard Delaney, Detective J. Salter expanded the investigation to all personnel who had worked for Stewart Bakery Supply between 2004 and 2006, when the company was still operational. The goal was to locate anyone who could confirm the condition of the Medford warehouse during the disappearance period. From payroll and employment records More than 23 former employees were identified, most having since left Long Island. After 1 week of tracing, the team located 7 still residing in the area, one of whom stood out, Glenn Harris, a truck driver who had worked for Stewart for nearly 8 years. Personnel records showed he quit in October 2005, just 1 month after the Delaney family vanished. Salter noted the timing coincidence and immediately dispatched 2 investigators to Harris's current address in Patchogue. The man in his mid-50s, thin, with prematurely gray hair, answered the door cautiously but agreed to cooperate. When asked about his time at Stewart Bakery Supply, he clearly recalled his final days. Harris explained the company had stopped baking and was mainly moving inventory and equipment to other facilities. During the initial interview, he spoke slowly and haltingly. But when Salter mentioned September 6, 2005, Harris fell silent for a long moment before saying he remembered that morning perfectly. He had been called to the warehouse around 6:30 a.m. at Jerry Stewart's direct request to drive the only remaining operational vehicle, a silver box truck, to transport sealed cargo to Medford. Harris stated that when he arrived, Stewart was already waiting with an unfamiliar tall man wearing a dark jacket who was never introduced by name. They loaded 2 large items completely wrapped in industrial tarps onto the truck and instructed him to drive straight to Medford and back into the rear loading area. When he asked what the cargo was, Stewart simply replied, "Kitchen equipment for temporary storage." Harris complied without further questions. He recalled the weather was cool and overcast, and the trip took about 20 minutes. At the warehouse, Stewart followed in his own vehicle. He and the other man opened the side door. They told Harris to back the truck up close, then closed the warehouse door. While waiting to unload, he smoked outside for roughly 15 minutes and heard sounds of metal hitting the concrete floor inside, followed by hammering or heavy objects dropping. When Stewart emerged, his clothes were covered in white dust, his collar soaked with sweat, and he said, "It's done, you can go." They paid him $500 in cash and told him no receipt was needed. Harris took the money and drove back to the old staging yard. When asked why the day stood out, he explained it was the only time in 8 years he was paid in cash and instructed not to log the trip. Salter asked him to describe the man with Stewart. Harris recalled only seeing him in profile, approximately 40 years old, brown hair, wearing gloves while loading. He added that afterward, Stewart ordered all employees never to use the silver truck again, claiming the brakes were bad and it would be picked up for scrap, but Harris never saw the truck again. 1 month later, he was laid off with a small severance and left the company. The statement was audio recorded and signed in the presence of a department-provided attorney. Harris consented to DNA and fingerprint samples to be excluded from evidence comparison. Before the interview ended, he repeated, "I don't know what happened inside that warehouse that day, but something definitely wasn't right." Salter immediately cross-referenced the timeline Harris provided for the Medford arrival with the 7:18 a.m. call between the Delaney residence and Stewart's office. The times aligned almost perfectly, further bolstering the statement's credibility. The report was completed the same day, concluding, witness Glenn Harris confirms, on the morning of September 6, 2005, he drove a silver box truck carrying sealed cargo at Jerry Stewart's request to the Medford warehouse, present on site with Stewart and an unidentified male. Statement consistent with telephone data and geographic location. The 19-page transcribed statement was labeled Evidence 17A, attached to a transport route diagram and estimated timeline. For the first time since the case was reopened, a living witness had emerged, providing direct testimony linking Stewart to both the exact time and location of the Delaney family's disappearance. Glenn Harris's testimony caused the entire direction of the investigation to shift its focus back to the Medford warehouse complex, which was believed to be the final destination of the silver truck on the morning of September 6, 2005. Based on the witness information, Detective J. Salter immediately submitted a request for an additional search of the area that had previously been scanned with ground-penetrating radar and where a void beneath the concrete floor had been detected. The warrant was approved by the Suffolk County Court within 24 hours, authorizing the breaking of the concrete floor and the collection of biological samples within a 3-meter radius from the previously marked coordinates. On the morning of April 20, 2017, the forensic team, radar technicians, and crime scene personnel gathered at the Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse. The entire building was completely sealed off, with 2 investigation vehicles blocking both entrances. At 9 a.m., the cutting and drilling work began. The nearly 20-centimeter thick concrete layer was cut using specialized grinders, and each section was carefully separated to avoid damaging anything beneath it. As the first layer of cement was removed, the smell of long damp earth rose up. Beneath the floor appeared a layer of gray clay that was not continuous with the natural surrounding ground. Technicians used aluminum trowels to excavate thin layers, photographing as they dug. After nearly 2 hours, at a depth of approximately 60 centimeters, they discovered dark brown stains spreading in patches. Ultraviolet light produced a strong positive reaction for hemoglobin. The area was immediately cordoned off, marked with plastic stakes and sealing tape. A small soil sample was taken with sterile tools, placed in a test tube, and labeled 18A subfloor stain. As they continued to expand the excavation around the void, the forensic team discovered 2 additional fabric fibers, one deep red, one cream, stuck in the clay layer, along with several short hairs caught between broken pieces of cement. All were carefully collected and placed into separate evidence bags. By late morning, the entire void was fully exposed, roughly rectangular, more than 2 meters long, approximately 80 centimeters deep, and showing clear signs of having been manually filled in. No large objects were found, but the surrounding floor structure indicated the void had been opened and resealed multiple times. The preliminary scene report stated clearly, biological traces and organic material discovered beneath the floor of Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse, Medford area. High probability this was once a concealment or disposal site. The soil, hair, and fabric samples were immediately transferred to the State Central Laboratory for DNA analysis. Salter personally supervised the sealing process and signed the transport log. 2 days later, preliminary results arrived. Analysis revealed traces of human blood in the soil sample, with a DNA sequence matching Richard Delaney at 99.98%. The red fabric fiber carried Elaine Delaney's DNA, while the cream fiber contained a mixture of epithelial cells from both victims. The report confirmed no foreign DNA, ruling out cross-contamination. The results were printed, officially stamped, and forwarded to the Suffolk County Police Department and the District Attorney's Office. In the summary section, the Chief Forensic Examiner concluded, traces of blood and DNA from both victims discovered beneath the Medford warehouse floor. High probability this location is directly connected to violent acts or body disposal. Recommendation: reclassify Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse as the primary crime scene. Salter and the investigation team returned to Medford to redocument the scene, this time with the goal of reconstructing possible events. He cross-referenced the time Glenn Harris was present, the 7:18 a.m. cell phone data, and the location of the void. Everything aligned within the 7 o'clock, 8 a.m. window, the same time frame the victims were last seen in Beltur. At an internal afternoon briefing, every member of the cold case unit agreed on the assessment. The Stewart warehouse is the site where the violent acts and subsequent concealment involving the 2 Delaney victims took place. A 32-page supplemental report was completed, including a 3D map of the floor structure, luminol reaction photographs, and DNA analysis results. On April 23, 2017, the Suffolk County Police Department officially changed the status of Case 05H337B from suspicious homicide to confirmed homicide scene identified. A new entry appeared in the electronic database, primary crime scene, Medford warehouse confirmed. Dual DNA, physical, and biological evidence conclusively established that the Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse was the primary scene where the acts leading to the deaths of Richard and Elaine Delaney occurred, ending more than 12 years of uncertainty about where the couple disappeared. Immediately after the Medford warehouse was confirmed as the primary crime scene, Detective J. Salter requested retrieval of all 2005 investigative files to review procedural decisions, particularly those concerning the industrial park where Stewart Bakery Supply was located. His goal was to determine why, in the initial phase, police had not expanded the search to that area, despite it being less than 8 miles from the disappearance site. Dozens of old case folders were pulled from the cold case storage room, including minutes from an internal September 2005 meeting chaired by then-Lieutenant Harold McCree, the original lead investigator on the Delaney disappearance. While reviewing the minutes, Salter discovered a short note on page 14, proposal to obtain warrant for Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse, Medford, not approved, no criminal element. The line had been crossed out but remained clearly legible, with McCree's confirming signature beneath it. This caught attention because field reports had mentioned the Medford Industrial Park in a delivery driver's statement, and because it lay along a logical route if a transport vehicle was involved. Salter located the original proposal, drafted on September 14, 2005, by a junior officer named Paul Devine. It stated clearly, "Need warrant to search Stewart Warehouse due to direct financial ties with Richard Delaney, and witness confirmation of silver truck near the location." 3 days later, the proposal was stamped rejected, insufficient cause, and signed by Harold McCree. No further action was taken. The final comment in the minutes read, "No need to expand search to industrial area, high probability of voluntary disappearance." Salter read the section 3 times, then compared it to current findings that confirmed the Stewart warehouse contained both victims' DNA evidence. He immediately prepared an 8-page internal report titled, Review of Investigative Omission 2005, listing serious procedural violations, failure to follow protocol in verifying a location linked to a subject with financial motive, failure to inspect a suspicious site, and unilateral rejection of a proposal without consulting the assigned prosecutor. To bolster his findings, Salter re-interviewed former officer Paul Devine, now working private security in Brooklyn. Devine confirmed he had written the search proposal because he suspected Stewart's involvement after discovering financial records linking the two men. He recounted that when he submitted the file, McCree told him directly, "We don't have time for commercial theories. This case will close soon." As a low-ranking detective at the time, Devine lacked authority to challenge the decision. The statement was recorded by Salter and attached to the reinvestigation file. Salter's final report, submitted to the Suffolk County Internal Oversight Committee, concluded, confirmed investigative misconduct. Lead investigator Harold McCree deliberately disregarded a proposal to search a location with both financial and geographic relevance, resulting in the loss of critical evidence and prolonging case resolution by more than 10 years. A copy was filed in Case 05H337B under Historical Oversight Review. In his personal notes, Salter added, "One crossed-out line in the minutes could have changed the entire history of the case." The discovery of this misconduct not only explained why the Medford warehouse was overlooked in the original investigation, but also raised questions about the competence and transparency of the 2005 team, opening the possibility of administrative accountability for those involved. After the 2005 misconduct report was submitted to the Internal Oversight Committee and the Medford warehouse was confirmed as the primary crime scene, Detective J. Salter and the Cold Case Unit shifted focus to the only remaining living suspect with direct involvement, Jerry Stewart. The most recent administrative record showed Stewart had left New York years earlier and now resided in Boca Raton, Florida, where he owned a 2-story home in an upscale community. Tax records indicated he still maintained Stewart Bakery Supply as a dormant corporate entity with a virtual address to avoid audits. Based on the DNA results, Glenn Harris's testimony, and physical evidence recovered from the Medford warehouse, Salter drafted an application for a federal arrest warrant, charging Stewart provisionally with first-degree murder under special circumstances and concealment of criminal evidence. Because Stewart was outside New York jurisdiction, the file was forwarded to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York and the FBI's New York Field Office. On May 2, 2017, the federal court in Brooklyn signed the arrest warrant and issued an interstate detainer. A joint task force consisting of 4 FBI agents, 2 NYPD detectives, and 2 Suffolk County officers was formed under Salter's command to execute the arrest. Prior to deployment, intelligence indicated Stewart continued to conduct personal financial activities and regularly traveled between Boca Raton and Fort Lauderdale in a black Lincoln SUV. His cell phone signal and credit card transactions were monitored for 3 consecutive days, fixing his location at a residence on Palm Meadows Drive. Search warrants were prepared concurrently, authorizing seizure of computers, accounting records, and data storage devices. On the morning of May 7th, at 6:20 a.m., the task force approached the house while Stewart was inside. FBI agents knocked and announced the arrest warrant. Stewart opened the door in sleepwear, appeared confused but did not resist. He was handcuffed on the spot, read his Miranda rights, and placed in a waiting agency vehicle. Simultaneously, NYPD and local police began searching the entire residence. In a small first-floor office, they located 2 safes. After opening them with keys seized from the bedroom, agents found numerous accounting documents, handwritten ledgers, and expired commercial contracts. An FBI financial agent conducted a preliminary review and discovered several falsified invoices bearing the name Delaney Kitchen Supplies with copied signatures of Richard Delaney used in 2005 transactions. Additionally, in a brown file folder was a backdated stock transfer agreement between Delaney and Stewart. The Delaney signature was determined not to match known samples. All documents were immediately seized, sealed, and labeled evidence. Financial fraud related to homicide case 05H337B. In a desk drawer, agents also recovered a 500 GB portable hard drive containing old Stewart Bakery Supply accounting data. All evidence was transferred to the FBI's digital laboratory in Miami for imaging and examination. The 18-page scene report confirmed. At the residence of suspect Jerry Stewart, Boca Raton, Florida, discovery of accounting documents, commercial contracts, and ledgers showing signs of forged Richard Delaney signatures. Seizure of 2 portable hard drives containing Stewart Bakery Supply Company data. After processing at the scene, Stewart was transported to the FBI's South Florida headquarters, then flown back to New York on a secured federal flight. Salter and 2 agents accompanied him to oversee the extradition. That evening, the Suffolk County Police Department's internal bulletin announced, suspect Jerry Stewart, male age 50, arrested in Florida pursuant to federal warrant in connection with the 2005 Delaney homicide. It was the first time in 12 years that Jerry Stewart's name officially appeared on a federal criminal wanted list, closing a pursuit that had lasted more than a decade since the Delaney couple vanished from Belterre. After extradition back to New York, Jerry Stewart was held at the federal detention facility in Brooklyn, pending interrogation. The first formal interview took place on May 9, 2017, attended by the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, 2 Suffolk County detectives, and Stewart's privately retained defense counsel. After being fully advised of his right to remain silent and right to counsel, he agreed to cooperate and began recounting events. According to his initial statement, Stewart admitted that on the morning of September 6, 2005, Richard Delaney had called him to meet at the Medford warehouse to settle outstanding investment matters once and for all. Stewart said a long-running financial dispute existed between them, primarily over capital invested in a chain of food supply stores they had once co-owned. He stated that Richard arrived at the warehouse around 7:45 a.m., accompanied by Elaine, intending to sever all business ties. An argument ensued and grew loud. According to Stewart, during a physical scuffle, Richard shoved him, prompting a defensive reaction that caused Richard to fall and strike his head on the edge of a metal table. Stewart claimed Elaine then rushed forward. He tried to hold her back, but accidentally struck her hard, causing her to slip and hit her head on the floor. Stewart said both victims were unconscious but still breathing. He panicked, called an acquaintance for help handling the situation, and then covered it up, instead of calling police because he feared manslaughter charges. He insisted he had no intent to kill and that it was an unwanted accident. When asked for the identity of the acquaintance who helped, Stewart was vague, describing him only as an old business contact, no longer in touch. The prosecutor demanded a name. Stewart shook his head and said he no longer remembered clearly. Throughout the interview, Stewart maintained an even tone, occasionally appearing emotional when discussing the consequences, repeatedly stating he was not a murderer. However, investigators quickly identified multiple inconsistencies between his account and the forensic evidence. First, the Medford warehouse examination showed Richard and Elaine's blood more than half a meter beneath the concrete, proving deliberate excavation and concealment, not a sudden accident followed by departure. Second, chemical reactions and blood degradation levels indicated the blood had soaked into the soil many hours before being covered with cement, demonstrating planned concealment rather than panicked impulse. Additionally, DNA analysis of the red and cream fabric fibers recovered beneath the floor showed both victims had open wounds prior to burial, consistent with blunt force trauma. When confronted with this evidence, Stewart's tone shifted. He said he may have lost control during the argument, but maintained he never intended to kill and denied any premeditation or use of a weapon. Salter documented every statement while cross-referencing Glenn Harris's testimony, which placed Stewart and another man at the warehouse that morning moving sealed cargo. When asked about the silver truck and Harris, Stewart denied remembering hiring anyone for transport that day, yet a payment record issued by his company to Harris on September 7, 2005, proved the opposite. The prosecutor presented a copy of the invoice bearing Stewart's signature and the note Medford warehouse transport fee. Stewart fell silent for nearly a minute before quietly saying, "I may have signed it, but I don't remember." The interview concluded after 6 hours. The transcript ran 42 pages. The investigation team's interim conclusion: subject admits presence at the scene and physical altercation with victims, but denies intentional homicide. Statement contradicts forensic evidence and witness testimony. That same day, the forensic lab issued a supplemental detailed report confirming the blood and DNA samples beneath the warehouse floor belonged to both victims and showed equivalent decomposition, ruling out any scenario of victims being merely unconscious and later moved. This data rendered Stewart's argument accident claim untenable. Late that evening, Salter signed the interview transcript, adding it to case file 05H337B with the cold notation: confession inconsistent with forensic evidence, homicide intentionality under review. After concluding the first interrogation of Jerry Stewart and cross-referencing his contradictory statements, Detective J. Salter returned to reviewing all personnel who had ever worked or been temporarily contracted at the Medford warehouse in 2005, with the goal of identifying the second man that witness Glenn Harris had seen on the morning of the disappearance. During a follow-up meeting with Harris at the Suffolk County Investigation Office, Salter presented the forensic results and photographs from the excavated scene. Faced with the new evidence, Harris visibly wavered, remained silent for a long time, then said he remembered an additional detail he hadn't dared mention before, because he was afraid of getting involved. He stated that the man with Stewart that day was likely Peter Kellen, then around 40 years old, who had worked part-time security for the Medford warehouse complex. Harris described Kellen as a big, strong guy who usually wore an old army jacket, heavy leather boots that made noise when he walked, had a deep, raspy voice, and often showed up around the warehouse early in the morning, even though he didn't have a fixed shift. Upon hearing the name, Salter immediately ordered a search of the old Stewart Bakery Supply employment records and found a matching entry. Peter J. Kellen, born 1964, hired as temporary security supervisor from April to October 2005. The last known address on file was in Scranton, Pennsylvania. An urgent locate and apprehend order was issued, coordinated between the Suffolk County Police and Pennsylvania State Police. 3 days later, on May 15, 2017, Kellen was arrested at a small roadside motel off I-81, where he was working night security for a construction site. During the initial interview, Kellen appeared confused and repeatedly denied knowing Stewart. However, after Salter showed him a copy of the employment contract and Glenn Harris's statement, his expression changed. In the formal recorded interview with his attorney present, Kellen admitted he had worked at the Medford warehouse in 2005, but insisted he only helped with maintenance and mixing concrete when asked. When pressed for specifics, he stated that in early September 2005, Stewart called him to come to the warehouse early one morning to help fix a sunken section of the floor. When he arrived, Stewart and an unknown man were already there. The warehouse door was open, and the floor had been scraped up. Stewart said they needed to pour a new concrete slab and told him not to ask why. Kellen said he mixed cement, carried bags of sand, and poured concrete to fill the hole while Stewart stood watching, looking tense. After finishing, Stewart paid him $800 in cash and told him not to tell anyone because it was personal business. When Salter asked about the heavy object Harris had heard hitting the floor that morning, Kellen hesitated, then said, "Yes, I saw Stewart and the other guy drag something big out, wrapped in a green tarp, and place it in the hole. I couldn't see clearly, but it definitely wasn't kitchen equipment. It was long and stiff like a human body." He stated that after the concrete was poured, Stewart told him to roll it flat and leave immediately. That same afternoon, Stewart called again and said he would send more money in an envelope to keep quiet. Kellen insisted he didn't know exactly what had happened and didn't dare ask because he was afraid of losing the job. When asked why he had stayed silent for over 10 years, he answered in a trembling voice, "I thought it was just some shady business deal. I never imagined it was 2 human lives." Kellen's full statement was recorded, signed, and cross-checked against the crime scene data. Every detail he described, the location of the hole, the type of cement, and the seam in the floor, matched exactly with the ground-penetrating radar results and soil samples from the excavation. The interim report stated clearly, "Witness, accomplice Peter J. Kellen confirms he participated in pouring concrete at the Medford warehouse on the morning of September 6, 2005, in the presence of Jerry Stewart and an unidentified third man." Statement matches physical evidence, strengthening the hypothesis of concealment of victims' bodies. Based on this testimony, the federal prosecutor issued a formal arrest warrant for Kellen on charges of aiding and abetting first-degree murder and destruction of criminal evidence. At the time of arrest, he did not resist and only said quietly, "I was just hired to pour the floor." New evidence seized from Kellen's residence included an old notebook listing cash payments received in 2005, one entry reading 8/9, 800 cash, JS. This item was sealed as evidence 22B and added to case file 05H337B. On May 18, Salter's consolidated report to the Suffolk County Police Department concluded Peter Kellen, 2005 warehouse security guard, identified as direct accomplice in the concealment of evidence and processing of the crime scene. His statement corroborates the entire sequence of events on the morning of September 6, 2005, and confirms Jerry Stewart's role as the mastermind. Following Peter Kellen's detailed statement, Detective J. Salter immediately applied for an official excavation warrant for the exact area Kellen had pointed out inside the Medford warehouse. Kellen's report precisely identified the coordinates, the southeast corner of the building, where he had helped pour new concrete over a large object wrapped in tarp. Based on the statement matching the prior site diagram and radar report, the Suffolk County Court approved the expanded excavation warrant on May 20, 2017. The next morning, the entire Medford Industrial Park was completely sealed off. Police set up barriers 100 meters from the warehouse and barred all access. The state forensic team, excavation specialists, and crime scene technicians were deployed with support from the FBI's Criminal Surveillance Unit. Work began at 8 a.m. under Salter's direct command. Drilling and concrete cutting equipment was positioned at the marked area, where the floor showed newer cement compared to the rest. As the first layer of concrete was broken away, a metallic and damp odor spread through the enclosed space. Beneath a thick layer of clay, the metal detector gave continuous strong signals. The technicians paused and switched to manual digging. After nearly 2 hours, a circular metal surface gradually emerged. When cleaned, it was the lid of a large industrial drum, welded shut with thick steel. About half a meter away, the detector registered another identical signal, confirming a second drum buried parallel to the first. The entire area was immediately sealed, and the drums were labeled Container A and Container B. The forensic team used specialized saws to cut open the first lid. A heavy decomposition smell forced a brief pause for ventilation. Inside Container A, technicians found multiple layers of plastic sheeting. At the bottom were heavily decomposed human skeletal remains, still holding their basic frame. Container B was similar, but the skull still had attached medium-length light brown hair. Bone samples were taken piece by piece, placed in preservation boxes, and transported immediately to the New York State Forensic Laboratory. The excavation continued until evening. Each drum was photographed, 3D scanned, and measured precisely. The distance between the two drums was recorded as 55 centimeters. Surrounding soil was sampled to estimate burial time based on organic decomposition density. In the preliminary scene report, the lead forensic pathologist wrote, 2 industrial drums containing adult human remains buried beneath the concrete floor of Stewart Bakery Supply Warehouse, Medford. Depth and welded ceiling indicate intentional long-term concealment. Salter observed the entire process in silence, taking notes on every detail. When the drums were sealed, he personally signed the transport authorization to the Central Forensic Identification Lab. There, forensic specialists began DNA analysis and identification. Bone samples were processed using marrow DNA extraction and compared to reference samples stored in Richard and Elaine Delaney's missing persons file. After 36 hours of testing, results were delivered to Salter's office. DNA from Container A matched Richard Delaney at 99.99%, Container B matched Elaine Delaney at 99.998%. The official report confirmed the victims' identities after 12 years missing. The conclusion was printed in bold, remains positively identified as Richard and Elaine Delaney. Cause of death, pending further analysis. Immediately upon receiving the results, Salter forwarded copies to the federal prosecutor and Suffolk County Police. In an emergency meeting on the evening of May 22, the prosecutor declared, "The discovery and identification of the victim's remains confirms premeditated murder, establishes the Stewart warehouse as both the crime scene and disposal site." At the same time, local reporters learned of the excavation activity. The Medford Industrial Park remained locked down for another 24 hours to protect the scene. The investigation team cleared broken concrete, sealed the entire area under white tarps. The 52-page excavation report was completed, detailing the timeline, coordinates, evidence types, and DNA results. 12 years after the reported disappearance, Suffolk County Police finally had their answer. Richard and Elaine Delaney had been murdered and buried beneath the floor of the warehouse owned by the man once considered their closest business partner. After excavation and DNA identification were complete, the full remains of Richard and Elaine Delaney were transferred to the New York State Central Forensic Laboratory for in-depth cause of death analysis. The autopsy was conducted over 4 consecutive days under the supervision of the chief medical examiner and a representative from the federal prosecutor's office. Specialists began by reconstructing the skeletons from the fragments recovered in the 2 drums. Richard's skeleton was nearly intact, missing only the right hand and part of the cervical vertebrae. Elaine's was smaller, but the skull was complete, facilitating injury identification. Under X-ray, both sets of remains showed characteristic depressed skull fractures consistent with impact from a narrow-surfaced blunt object. Richard's frontal bone had a depression about 4 centimeters deep with a semicircular fracture line. Elaine had a complex fracture at the occiput, with cracks radiating to both temples. There were no stab wounds or sharp force injuries, ruling out edged weapons. The interim report stated, cause of death determined to be blunt force head trauma, likely instantaneous or within minutes. The skull fragments were compared side by side with metal objects seized during a supplemental search of the Stewart warehouse. Among them was a 65 centimeters round steel bar, weighing nearly 3 kilograms, slightly curved at one end, with rust and dried brown residue. Originally thought to be an old oven support brace, and retained only because of its proximity to the concrete patch, it was now re-examined. When the indentation on Richard's skull was overlaid with the curve of the steel bar, the shapes matched almost perfectly. Electron microscope analysis of the metal surface revealed traces of calcium and collagen, components characteristic of human bone tissue. The item was catalogued as Exhibit 24A and sent for additional DNA testing. Results confirmed microscopic DNA from both Richard and Elaine on the striking end of the bar, despite advanced degradation. The lab concluded the metal rod was the murder weapon for both victims. In the final 23-page report, the conclusion was underlined in red: cause of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Weapon identified: metallic rod recovered from Stewart Bakery Supply warehouse. Additional examination also revealed bruising on Richard's shoulder bones and a fractured wrist on Elaine, indicating they fought back before being struck. There were no ligature marks, supporting the theory of a surprise attack while they stood near a work table or storage area. Cement residue on Elaine's hair matched the type Kellen said he used, proving the bodies were placed in the drums immediately after death. The results were presented to Detective Salter and the federal prosecutor on May 28, 2017. When the final report was placed on the table, Salter looked only at the first line, blunt force trauma to the head, then closed it and signed the master summary. The prosecutor's office officially recorded, cause of death established by forensic evidence. Murder weapon matches object, recovered from Stewart Bakery Supply scene. Conclusion: premeditated assault. This evidence solidified the entire chain from Glenn Harris's and Kellen's statements, proving the case was no longer manslaughter during an argument, as Stewart had previously claimed, but planned murder. All evidence, the metal rod, soil samples, skull photographs, and forensic reports, was sealed and added to Case File 0-5-337B, with the new note: cause of death established, weapon confirmed. After more than 12 years, the Delaney disappearance was officially classified as murder, supported by irrefutable forensic proof. Once the forensic results confirmed the cause of death for Richard and Elaine Delaney and the murder weapon was identified, Detective J. Salter directed the investigative team to compile all phone records, financial data, physical evidence, and statements to reconstruct the exact sequence of events on the morning of September 6, 2005, the day the victims vanished. The analysis meeting took place at Suffolk County Police Headquarters and lasted nearly 8 hours. On the large whiteboard in the conference room, Salter numbered each timeline marker in order, starting at 7:00 a.m., the last time neighbors saw Elaine in her driveway. Recovered phone data showed the final call from the Delaney home to Stewart Bakery Supply at 7:18 a.m., lasting 2 minutes 37 seconds. Based on cell tower pings and travel distance, the team determined Richard and Elaine left home immediately after the call and arrived at the Medford warehouse around 7:45 a.m. Glenn Harris, the truck driver, confirmed seeing Stewart and another man, later identified as Peter Kellen, standing outside the warehouse at that exact time. There, the two victims entered to discuss the transfer of $482,000 between the companies. According to the crime scene reconstruction, The conversation quickly escalated into a violent argument. Based on blood spatter direction and pattern on the floor samples, Richard was struck first, hit in the head with the 65 centimeters metal rod found in the warehouse, collapsing on the spot. Elaine ran toward him, showed signs of resistance, and was struck hard in the back of the head, dying almost instantly. Bone bruising on Richard's shoulders and Elaine's fractured wrist confirmed defensive reactions, proving a face-to-face attack. After the murders, Stewart called Kellen, who was working temporary security in the industrial park, to come help clean up. Around 8:15 a.m., Harris was instructed to deliver a sealed shipment to the Medford warehouse. When he arrived, Kellen was already there, and Stewart was wearing a dark jacket with white dust on his hands. Harris waited outside and heard metallic clanging and a heavy object hitting the floor, sounds that later matched the moment Kellen and Stewart dragged the two bodies, wrapped in tarp, into the industrial drums. They then welded the lids shut, dug a deep hole, and poured concrete over it. By approximately 9:30 a.m., Harris left the warehouse with $500 cash, while Kellen stayed behind to smooth the new concrete surface. Financial records further supported motive. Bank documents showed Stewart withdrew the entire $482,000 just 2 days before the disappearance. A forged stock transfer agreement, found at Stewart's Florida residence, attempted to legitimize the money, showing Richard's supposedly consenting signature, later proven to be photocopied. The strained financial relationship, combined with Stewart owing Richard a large debt, provided the direct motive for murder to erase the debt and seize the assets. The entire sequence was reconstructed into a detailed timeline. 7:18. Call from Delaney residence to Stewart. 7:45. Victims arrive at Medford warehouse. 7:50. 8 o'clock. Confrontation turns deadly. 8:15. Harris instructed to deliver shipment. 8:30. Bodies placed in drums and buried. 9 o'clock. Stewart leaves. Kellen finishes concrete pour. Physical evidence, blood, fibers, watch, and DNA matched this sequence perfectly. Stewart's cell phone location history confirmed his device was in the Medford area from 7:40 to 9:05 a.m., aligning exactly with the timeline. Salter's 87-page consolidated report concluded, Jerry Stewart is the mastermind who directly caused the deaths of Richard and Elaine Delaney to seize assets. Peter Kellen is an accomplice who assisted in concealment and disposal of the bodies. The electronic case summary at Suffolk County Police was updated to read, timeline reconstructed, motive established, physical evidence consistent. Primary suspect, Jerry Stewart. Accomplice, Peter Kellen. By connecting financial records, phone data, physical evidence, and witness statements, the 12-year investigation finally recreated the complete morning of September 6, 2005, a closed, gapless chain of criminal actions by Stewart and Kellen. After the chain of events was fully reconstructed and the physical evidence confirmed, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office officially entered the criminal prosecution preparation phase against Jerry Stewart and Peter Kellen. The first meeting between the investigative team and Chief Prosecutor Mary Donahue took place in early June 2017 in the special processing room reserved for cold case files. The entire case file, exceeding 2,000 pages, was reorganized and included forensic results, witness statements, financial data, phone records, and copies of search warrants. Chief Prosecutor Mary Donahue emphasized that the chain of evidence had surpassed the threshold required for formal indictment under Section 125.25 of the New York Penal Law, second-degree murder, along with related charges of concealing and destroying evidence. On June 8, the preliminary indictment was drafted, clearly stating that Stewart was the mastermind who attacked Richard and Elaine Delaney at the Medford warehouse using a blunt object that caused fatal traumatic brain injuries, then together with accomplice Kellen, disposed of the bodies by welding shut 2 metal drums and burying them beneath the concrete floor. The stated motive was to seize assets and erase traces of illegal transactions. Meanwhile, Kellen was charged under Section 20.00 as an accomplice to the murder and under Section 215.40 for tampering with physical evidence. During the final interrogation before the file was transferred to court, Kellen agreed to full cooperation with the prosecution in exchange for a reduced sentence. The plea agreement was signed on June 10, allowing him to plead guilty to aiding in the concealment of human remains and obstructing the investigation in return for a maximum sentence of 15 years imprisonment. In his new statement, Kellen reaffirmed the entire sequence of events on the morning of September 6, 2005, matching perfectly with Salter's timeline, while providing additional details about the murder weapon, a long metal bar that Stewart had thrown into a corner of the warehouse after the crime. His testimony was regarded as a critical strengthening factor for the indictment. Regarding Stewart, the prosecution submitted to the federal court a request to maintain the charge of second-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, intentional infliction of fatal injury, premeditation, and financial manipulation. A no-bail detention order was signed immediately afterward. At the Brooklyn Detention Center, Stewart refused to sign the plea offer and insisted it was still an accident during an argument. However, the prosecution team had already prepared a counter-strategy. They relied on forensic results confirming the blow to the skull was delivered with downward force, indicative of an intentional attack rather than a reflexive one. Additionally, burying the bodies in welded drums and covering them with concrete was classified as planned conduct, demonstrating clear criminal intent. At the end of June, a closed-door meeting was held between Prosecutor Donahue, Detective Salter, and an FBI representative to finalize the prosecution file. The final decision was approved. The case would be tried in Suffolk County Criminal Court rather than federal court because the murders occurred within New York State jurisdiction, though it would remain under FBI oversight due to interstate elements in the extradition process. On June 28, the formal indictment was announced, containing 7 main charges against Stewart: second-degree murder, concealment of evidence, financial fraud, obstruction of investigation, making false statements to federal authorities, forgery of documents, and dissipation of assets, along with 2 charges against Kellen, accomplice to murder and destruction of evidence. The case was assigned docket number 2017 CR 0487. On the same day, the prosecutor signed seizure orders for all assets related to Stewart Bakery Supply, including the house in Boca Raton and bank accounts in Stewart's name. The physical evidence, the metal bar, Rolex watch, blood samples, and phone data, was final sealed and transferred to the court's evidence vault under separate case codes. In the report Salter submitted to the department, he wrote a brief note: "The evidence has spoken for the statements. From here, the case no longer belongs to investigation, it belongs to justice." By early July 2017, the District Attorney's Office officially filed the case with Suffolk County Criminal Court and scheduled the preliminary trial date, marking the start of prosecution 12 years after Richard and Elaine Delaney disappeared. The trial of Jerry Stewart and co-defendant Peter Kellen officially opened on January 9, 2018, at Suffolk County Criminal Court, presided over by Judge Eleanor Strauss. Local media described it as the largest cold case trial in county history, drawing dozens of reporters and residents who had lived in the Belterre area in 2005. Courtroom 4A was packed from the morning. The front row was reserved for the victim's family. Evan Delaney, now 30 years old, sat silently between his 2 aunts. Across the aisle, Stewart was brought in wearing a gray suit, hands cuffed, face expressionless. Beside him sat defense attorney Thomas Green, while co-defendant Peter Kellen was tried separately after signing a plea deal and agreeing to testify for the prosecution. Judge Strauss read a summary of the indictment, listing the 7 charges against Stewart, the most serious being intentional second-degree murder and tampering with physical evidence. When asked how he pleaded, Stewart quietly said, "Not guilty." Chief Prosecutor Mary Donahue delivered the opening statement, declaring the case proved that the truth can be buried under concrete for 12 years, but can never be buried forever. She presented a timeline diagram reconstructing the entire morning of September 6, 2005, supported by physical evidence, witness testimony, and forensic results. Photographs of the Medford warehouse, soil samples, the rusted metal bar, and the 2 metal drums were projected on the large courtroom screen. The entire room fell silent when the prosecutor read from the report. DNA from Richard and Elaine Delaney matched 99.999% with medical records. Cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The first witness called was Glenn Harris, the truck driver, who recounted in a trembling voice how that morning he had delivered sealed cargo to Stewart's warehouse at Stewart's request. When asked if he noticed anything unusual, Harris replied, "I heard something heavy fall and the sound of hammering, then Stewart told me to leave immediately." The defense attempted to question the witness's memory after more than 10 years, but Harris stood firm. The second witness was Peter Kellen, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit and escorted under heavy guard. He confirmed the entire concrete pouring process, stating that Stewart had ordered the 2 drums welded shut and told him to cover the floor again as fast as possible. When the defense attorney asked if he was certain the drums contained bodies, Kellen answered, "I didn't need to look. I knew they were dead." That statement left many in the courtroom breathless. After the witnesses, the prosecution presented technical evidence, phone records confirming the last call from the Delaney home to Stewart's office, bank records proving a $482,000 withdrawal, forensic reports confirming victim DNA on the watch, fabric fibers, and metal bar. Each piece of evidence was introduced carefully in the order it was discovered, with explanations from forensic experts. When the enlarged photo of the metal bar appeared on screen, Stewart remained motionless, only turning his face away. The defense attempted to build the argument of an accident during an argument, claiming Stewart had no motive to kill and only panicked and mishandled the aftermath. However, the prosecution countered with forensic data. The impact force on the victims' skulls was downward, characteristic of an intentional attack. Furthermore, welding the drums shut and burying them under concrete constituted evidence of criminal intent. During cross-examination, Donahue directly asked Stewart to explain the money withdrawal, the morning phone call, and how the victim's DNA ended up in his warehouse. Stewart remained silent, staring at the table. Attorney Green interrupted, saying his client would not answer questions that might incriminate him. Judge Strauss reminded the defense that the right to remain silent is not the same as refuting evidence. The trial lasted 12 days. The prosecution presented 46 pieces of physical evidence, 18 witnesses, and 4 forensic experts. The defense called only 2 witnesses, one a former Stewart Bakery Supply employee, but their testimony was dismissed due to contradiction. In closing arguments, the prosecution asserted that Stewart intentionally killed both victims to seize their assets and then staged their disappearance. Donahue concluded with a line quoted in many newspapers, "Stewart thought concrete would keep the secret forever, but concrete has memory too, and today it has spoken." The judge recessed the trial for jury deliberations. Throughout the final afternoon, Stewart maintained absolute silence and never once looked toward the Delaney family. After 12 consecutive days of trial and more than 20 hours of deliberation, on the morning of January 25, 2018, the Suffolk County Criminal Court jury returned to courtroom 4A to deliver the final verdict in the Jerry Stewart case. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was heavy. Everyone fell silent as the 12 jurors entered, presided over by Judge Eleanor Strauss. Stewart sat between 2 security officers, gripping the armrest tightly, his face cold. When the court clerk asked the foreperson for the decision, the middle-aged woman in the front row slowly read aloud, "We, the jury in the Suffolk County Criminal Court, after examining all evidence, testimony, and arguments from both sides, find the defendant Jerry Stewart guilty of second-degree murder under Section 125.25 of the New York Penal Law." As soon as the words ended, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Evan Delaney bowed his head, hands clenched tightly, while Judge Strauss nodded slightly to confirm the verdict. Next, the clerk announced the sentence unanimously recommended by the jury: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Stewart showed no reaction, only staring straight ahead, his face ashen. Defense attorney Thomas Green requested permission to file an appeal, but the judge stated clearly, "The right to appeal is noted, but the sentence takes effect immediately." Chief Prosecutor Mary Donahue spoke briefly. "Justice came late, but it came." The court then proceeded to sentence Peter Kellen, who had pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation. Thanks to the plea agreement, his charge was reduced from accomplice to murder to aiding in concealment and destruction of evidence. The judge imposed a sentence of 20 years imprisonment plus 5 years of supervised release upon completion. When asked if he had anything to say, Kellen stood and said in a trembling voice, "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I can't undo what I did, but I hope they can now rest in peace." His words brought tears to many in the room. After sentencing, Judge Strauss read the court's findings, affirming that Stewart's actions were intentional and premeditated, aimed at seizing assets and erasing evidence of crime, while praising the cold case unit and forensic laboratory for restoring justice to the victims after 12 years. The official sentence was recorded: Jerry Stewart, life imprisonment without parole for second-degree murder and concealment of evidence. Peter Kellen, 20 years imprisonment for aiding in the concealment of a crime. As the trial concluded, Stewart was escorted out of the courtroom in silence, passing the row of Delaney family members without turning his head. Evan only watched him leave without a word. Media outside the courthouse reported throughout the afternoon, with television news broadcasts uniformly opening with the headline, "Delaney case closed after 12 years. Justice served." The Suffolk County Police Department held a brief press conference in which Detective Jay Salter stated, "We have fulfilled our duty to 2 people who were forgotten. Evidence never dies, it only waits to be found." That quote appeared on the front page of local newspapers the next morning. In the final report submitted to the New York State District Attorney's Office, the closing line read simply, "Case 05H337B closed, justice served." The case file was sealed and archived in the cold case storage with a red stamp, "Solved." More than 12 years after the missing persons report, the names of Richard and Elaine Delaney were finally removed from the National Missing Persons Database, closing one of the longest and most complex cases in Suffolk County history, where the silence of concrete was broken to give voice to those who could no longer speak. After the Delaney verdict became final, the Suffolk County Police Department, in coordination with the NYPD and the New York State District Attorney's Office, conducted a comprehensive post-case review to evaluate procedural failures during the 2005 investigation. The report was released in June 2018, 3 months after Jerry Stewart's conviction, with the goal of identifying why the case had remained stalled for 12 years and recommending improvements for handling cold case files in the future. The review panel consisted of 8 independent members, including forensic experts, former prosecutors, and criminalistics technicians who examined more than 20,000 pages of old records, meeting minutes, and internal investigative documents from the initial phase. The findings confirmed multiple serious errors in crime scene evaluation and evidence handling. The primary issue was that the 2005 lead investigator, Lieutenant Harold McCree, rejected a proposal to search the Stewart Bakery Supply warehouse in Medford without consulting the supervising prosecutor, causing investigators to miss the primary crime scene in the early stage. The report also highlighted that evidence storage was not updated to new DNA technology standards at the time, resulting in fabric fibers and footwear impressions collected from the Delaney home being sealed for years without testing. Additionally, the data sharing mechanism between departments, particularly between financial crimes and forensics, was rated disconnected and slow to respond, causing suspicious transaction evidence between Stewart and Richard Delaney to go unprocessed in a timely manner. In its recommendations, the review panel proposed 6 major reforms: 1, increase periodic cold case file reviews to at least twice per year; 2, establish a centralized statewide DNA database; 3, mandate retraining of investigators in long-term evidence preservation procedures; 4, create an interdepartmental reporting mechanism among forensics, financial and digital units. 5. Incorporate mitochondrial DNA analysis into standard protocol for all unexplained disappearances. And 6. Form an independent committee to oversee approval or rejection of search warrants in serious cases. The 112-page report was sent to the governor and released publicly on the NYPD website. At the press conference, a Suffolk County Police spokesperson acknowledged, had DNA review procedures been applied earlier, justice for the Delaney family would not have had to wait 12 years. The State District Attorney's Office endorsed all recommendations and announced the Forensic Renewal Initiative, a plan to upgrade evidence databases and testing technology statewide. The Delaney file itself was used as training material for cold case investigation courses. The panel's final summary concluded, the 2005 procedural failures did not stem from individual incompetence, but from a fragmented management system lacking connectivity and independent oversight. The greatest lesson of the Delaney case is justice can be delayed when evidence is forgotten. The post-review report was archived in state records with the note Case 05H337B, review completed, systemic reforms implemented. Following the release of the Delaney post-review report and the clear identification of 2005 failures, New York State implemented a series of reforms to its unsolved crime investigation system. In October 2018, the governor signed Executive Order 442, establishing the independent New York State Cold Case Bureau, headquartered in Albany and directly managed by the State District Attorney's Office, but operationally independent. The unit's mission is to oversee, review, and reinvestigate unsolved cases statewide, prioritizing those with biological evidence or unexploited financial elements. The new bureau comprises more than 50 investigators, forensic specialists, digital technicians, and court advisors, including several members of the original Delaney investigative team who were invited as founding experts. The order also mandates that any cold case file inactive for more than 5 years be automatically transferred to the Bureau for re-evaluation, with plans to retest evidence using next-generation DNA technology. One of the most significant improvements is the uniform adoption of 3 systems: ground-penetrating radar, GPR. For non-invasive surveying of old scenes, the National CODIS DNA database for matching trace biological samples, and the Forensic Digital Link Platform, an integrated system for phone, computer, banking, and surveillance camera data. The combination creates a 3-tier investigative process: data analysis, physical verification, biological matching. The Delaney case was selected as the model file for the entire training program of the new unit. All documents, crime scene photos, GPR maps, and test results were converted into an interactive dataset used for instruction at the New York State Police Academy. In the first training sessions, trainees were required to reconstruct the case timeline using real evidence to understand how GPR detected the concrete anomaly, how CODIS confirmed DNA from decade-old samples, and how recovered phone data from old magnetic tapes became the breakthrough link. According to internal statistics, in its first year, the Cold Case Bureau reopened 214 dormant cases, made progress in 43, and fully resolved 11, the highest resolution rate since New York began maintaining criminal case archives. The State Department of Justice evaluated the Delaney case as a technical turning point in investigation, proving that justice can be restored through the combination of modern technology and transparent data management. In parallel, the Legacy Review Program was launched to re-examine missing persons cases from the 1980s to 2000s for still testable biological material. A new statewide electronic storage system, NYS Forensic DataNet, was built, allowing online access between local police departments and the National DNA Center. The December 2019 newsletter from the State District Attorney's Office noted that 80% of new investigators have been trained using the Delaney Protocol, the 3-phase process of analysis, testing, and reconstruction. At the Bureau's 1-year anniversary ceremony, the Cold Case Bureau director stated, "In the past we waited for luck, now we create opportunity through data." At the end of the overall reform summary report, a short bolded note reads, "The Delaney case did not merely close one crime, it opened an entire system where the past is no longer forgotten." After the systemic reforms were enacted and the independent cold case unit became operational, the Delaney case was formally closed, following the standard New York State case closure protocol. In March 2019, the Suffolk County Police Department, in coordination with the State Prosecutor's Office, held the final review meeting to officially seal the file designated Delaney 2005. At the Central Evidence Archives in Albany, Evidence Box 05H337B was returned to the steel rack. A new red label was affixed to the outside bearing the bold caption, "Case Solved, 2017, along with the official seal of the prosecutor's office. Inside the box, in addition to the judgment, were the soil sample, fabric fibers, metal rod, Rolex watch, crime scene photographs, and copies of the forensic reports. Every item was individually sealed in transparent evidence bags, with barcodes for long-term storage and future training purposes. All digital data, from ground-penetrating radar maps and CODIS results to 3D crime scene renderings, were transferred to the NYS Forensic DataNet system, stored on secure servers, accessible only via two-factor authentication. The official closing report of the Suffolk County Police Department stated, "The Delaney 2005 case is fully resolved. The perpetrator has been convicted. The accomplice has pleaded guilty. The cause of death and primary crime scene have been established. No further suspects or evidence remain outstanding." The report also recognized the contributions of Detective Jay Salter and the 2017 Cold Case team, who received a special statewide commendation for outstanding contribution to the restoration of justice after more than a decade. In May 2019, the Delaney file was added to the New York State list of successfully resolved cold cases, joining 112 other cases reopened and solved through DNA technology and reinvestigation mechanisms. In the introductory section of the list, Delaney was classified under exemplary case of investigative reconstruction and became official teaching material at the New York State Police Academy and the Albany Forensic Training Center. A duplicate file is permanently displayed at the Cold Case Bureau's Justice Reclaimed exhibition, which documents cases once considered hopeless. There, a small plaque reads, "Belturre, Suffolk County, 2005-2017, 12 years, 2 lives, 1 truth." At the end of the final report, the signatures of the Governor of New York and the Director of the Cold Case Bureau were affixed and stamped on June 10, 2019. The very last line of the file, short but weighty, reads, "File archived, investigation complete, justice restored." With the official sealing, the Delaney 2005 file concluded its 12-year journey in search of the truth, leaving behind an important legacy for criminal investigation in the state of New York. Proof that even in cases thought long dead, a path to justice always remains. The Delaney 2005 story is not merely a criminal file solved after 12 years. It is also a mirror reflecting how American society confronts its mistakes and advances its own justice system. The disappearance and eventual discovery buried beneath the concrete floor of an ordinary-looking warehouse of 2 people, Richard and Elaine Delaney, serves as a reminder that evil sometimes hides not in distant places, but within the very relationships we believe to be most trustworthy. Yet what stands out even more is how justice was ultimately restored, not by luck, but by people willing to re-examine past errors, reform the system, and apply science to correct what had been missed. Detective Jay Salter's discovery of DNA evidence on a forgotten fabric sample and the state of New York's creation of an independent cold case unit embody the defining spirit of modern American society, the relentless pursuit of truth, no matter how much time has passed. In today's world, where information, data, and civic responsibility are more intertwined than ever, the lesson of the Delaney case applies not only to investigators, but to every individual. Never let indifference or blind trust cause us to overlook the smallest signs of truth. In the United States, where faith in the rule of law is foundational, this story reminds us that justice does not arrive on its own. It demands persistence, transparency, and the courage to face the past. In an era when mistakes can be concealed by data or power, Delaney 2005 proves that truth, when pursued to the end, can still prevail, and that each of us bears responsibility for protecting it. Thank you for following the investigation of Delaney 2005, where justice was found after 12 years buried beneath a silent layer of concrete. Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring other cold cases together, where the truth always awaits to be uncovered.